Hi everybody, I'm Luna. Welcome back to Luna Ơi! This is my first video of the year 2022. Happy New Year everyone! Looking back, the year 2021 was very difficult for people all around the world. Just look at the pandemic. More than 3.5 million people died last year because of COVID-19, in large part because of the emergence of Delta and Omicron variants, which have made COVID easier to spread and more difficult to contain. Most capitalist countries, especially the USA, have surrendered to this pandemic, with officials essentially telling the people that they are on their own to contend with the disease. Combine the terrible course COVID is taking with global climate change and rapidly increasing wealth inequality around the world, and it's easy to become really cynical and to lose hope entirely. But that doesn't mean that we should stop fighting. Instead, we should look to the people who have been fighting and winning against the oppressive forces of capitalist imperialism for inspiration. And this is exactly why leftists around the world should be paying close attention to the farmers of India who fought all year in 2021 and managed to win an important victory for the people. Today's video is a collaboration with the International magazine based on an article entitled The Great Peasant Victory in India, written by Dr. Yuga Rayalu, member of the Central Education Department of the Communist Party of India. This article will explain why Indian farmers oppose the 3 new agriculture laws which were introduced in September 2020. And we will also explore the true intentions of the right-wing Modi government, which has worked diligently to spread lies and misinformation about India's peasant uprising. This is just one of many informative articles that you can find in the International magazine. A full subscription is just $2.50 per month or $25 per year. So if you find this story interesting, I highly encourage you to check it out and consider subscribing. The link is right in the description. Now on with the show. Agriculture plays a critical role in India's economy, with about 50% of Indian population working as farmers. In September 2020, Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, representing the far-right Bharatiya Janata Party, announced 3 new agriculture laws which she claimed would be beneficial to farmers in India. However, the laws proved to be extremely unpopular, and millions of farmers in India rose up in protest. When protests first broke out in India, it was big news here in Vietnam. Agriculture is the most important sector in our economy, with about 70% of Vietnamese working as farmers, so we are concerned about this a lot. If you would like to learn more about Vietnamese agriculture and land reform, you can watch this video on my channel, but suffice to say, Vietnamese folks care a lot about farming and land rights. So, thus why were these 3 new laws in India so unpopular with Indian farmers? Well, first, let's take a look at how things worked before these unpopular laws were introduced. Farming has always been hugely important in India, both culturally and economically. Back in the 1960s, India suffered through some serious droughts and faced widespread famine. The government responded by building up agricultural infrastructure and subsidizing pesticides, fertilizer, and other resources to increase crop yields in a series of reforms which came to be known as the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution was really successful and managed to double wheat production in just 5 years. To make farming a more stable profession, the Indian government developed a system called the Agricultural Produce Market Committee, or APMC. The APMC is basically a market in which the government facilitates the purchase of crops from farmers so that every farmer has a guaranteed buyer at a predetermined price. For some items like rice and wheat, there is a minimum support price. So, in other words, thanks to the APMC, farmers in India have been guaranteed that their crops will be purchased and that they can make money farming no matter what the market does. And this has stabilized the lives of millions of farmers in India. Now, let's take a look at the first of the Modi government's 3 agriculture laws, which have been so unpopular with farmers. The law is called the Farmers' Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act, and it allows farmers to sell their crops outside of the APMC, as Dr. Rayalu writes.
All the supporters of Mr. Narendra Modi call this law a bold step in the direction of agrarian reforms. The truth is that this law, when implemented, would begin the process of the pauperization of the small and marginal farmers of India. 80% of farmers in India are small and marginal farmers having less than 5 hectares of cultivable land under their possession.
Now, the APMC was not a perfect system. Dr. Rayalu admits, for example, that farmers are sometimes forced to sell their crops at a lower price than the government regulates, and that unfair practices have sometimes occurred within the APMCs, so some reforms are necessary, but as Dr. Rayalu writes,
in spite of all these difficulties, the APMC mechanism provides strong support to the small and marginal farmer who otherwise cannot even think of going long distances to sell their produce. If this act comes into force, there would be open looting of the hapless farmers. The APMCs would die a natural death because this act would allow private agricultural markets, which would be tax-free.
In other words, once the government allows purchasers to buy crops on the free market, with no taxes or regulations whatsoever, no corporations will ever go to the APMCs and pay higher prices ever again. Why would they go to the government-regulated markets at all when they could pay lower prices to farmers on the quote-unquote free market? Dr. Rayalu continues.
Once the APMCs closed down, the traders would have a free hand to exploit the poor, powerless, small, and marginal farmer. This act would be a death knell for the small and marginal farmers who don't have means to travel long distances to sell their farm produce.
This brings us to the second law which Indian farmers have been fighting, the Farmers' Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act. This act allows farmers and corporations to have a contractual purchasing agreements with each other even before the crops have been grown. Dr. Rayalu explains how this would be detrimental to small farmers in India.
This act allows the direct entry of corporations into the agricultural sector in a big way. Once the small and marginal farmers are pauperized and forced to abandon farming thanks to the first act exposing them to the free market, the corporate houses will offer to buy their farms and the produce of their farms if they enter an agreement with them for a long period. Under this scheme, the corporate houses will provide all assistance to the farmer to grow the crops desired by the corporations. Prices would be fixed, and after the harvest, the corporation would pay the farmer for produce after deducting all the service costs rendered by the corporate house. From outside, this law looks very attractive and beneficial to the farmer, but in fact, it always benefits the rich corporations.
At first, if the market prices for the crops are good, then the corporation will agree to pay the farmers according to the contractual agreement. However, if the prices for the crops are low, then the corporation will find every excuse to refuse to buy from farmer, with the most common excuse being low-quality crops. The farmers do not have any protection from this kind of exploitation from corporations because, as Dr. Rayalu writes,
this law does not give the farmer the right to approach the court of law for arbitration. The farmer has to approach the district magistrate for the settlement of the issue where highly paid lawyers would be representing the corporate houses.
Obviously, poor and uneducated farmers stand no chance against sophisticated corporations with expensive lawyers in these kinds of power games. Any farmer caught in this situation will be forced to sell their produce at a lower price to their corporate masters, or be forced to seek out another buyer on the market. Though no corporation would agree to buy from a farmer at a higher price once it becomes public knowledge that they have lost a case against a big corporation. Dr. Rayalu writes,
in Punjab province, one international potato chip brand played this game for years to the disadvantage of poor farmers. The company gave a very good price for the potatoes in the first year. Many farmers were attracted and agreed to contract farming. The very next year, the company halved the price of potatoes, citing the smaller than agreed upon size of potatoes. In a single stroke, the company profited millions of dollars while the farmers lost everything. Of course, the farmers of Punjab in large numbers, almost all of them, are up in arms against these laws.
As you can see, the first law, which essentially forces farmers to sell on free market, combined with the second law, which makes it easier for corporations to prey on smaller farmers, would result in small farmers becoming forced to hand over their lands to big corporations over the next few years. This would result in smaller farmers becoming farm laborers or being forced to migrate to cities to work as wage laborers in factories owned by corporations. And there's still one more law to examine, the third of Modi's unpopular laws, the Essential Commodities Amendment Act. As you can probably tell, this act amends the Essential Commodities Act. So first, let's take a look at the Essential Commodities Act. In 1955, the government of India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, passed the Essential Commodities Act to ensure the delivery of certain commodities which are essential for Indian society. This act intended to discourage hoarding and crack down on black marketing of food supplies and other essentials to ensure that the people could live stable and secure lives. This act guarded the people against the free market practices, which would make food more expensive and less available to the common people of India. So, this new act under the Modi government empowers the central government to control the production, supply, distribution, trade, and commerce of certain commodities. This amendment seeks to increase competition in the agriculture sector and to liberalize the regulatory system which protects against hoarding and other market practices, which might hurt the common people of India, claiming that the free market will benefit farmers and consumers through competition. Sound familiar? Dr. Rayalu writes that
there is no reason for the present government to try and amend this pro-poor and pro-farmer act. By removing all curbs on hoarding, the present government wants to give a free hand to the big corporate houses to have control on the agricultural market so that their profits remain high under all circumstances. Once this act is amended, the corporate giants, who are making giant silos in northern India, would purchase all the food grains immediately after harvest, put them in the silos, and wait for the opportune time when the grains diminish from the market and prices soar. That would be the time when these silos would be opened and the market would be flooded with food grains and other essential items, allowing the corporations to make a killing in a short time. This strategy alone allowed onions purchased from farmers at the rate of 2 rupees per kilogram to be sold at the rate of 80 rupees per kilogram. The farmer got pittance for his hard work, and the customer had to pay through his nose. Meanwhile, the hoarder earned handsome profits.
This is precisely why Vietnam has made it impossible for corporations to own farms at all, and why we have a powerful price stabilization programs on essential foods and commodities in Vietnam. The only farmers in Vietnam are families and cooperatives who work their own land. We know from our own history with feudal landlords and imperialist slavers that farmers must own their own land and must be able to sell crops at a fair price in order to have stable, sustainable lives. We also have strong price stabilization programs which force corporations to buy and sell certain commodities at predetermined prices, ensuring that farmers are fairly compensated while consumers don't have to pay too much for staples, which is one of the reasons Vietnam has incredibly good food security. Having grown up working on a farm here in Vietnam, I must say that these laws sound very insidious. Vietnam has a similar system to the Indian APMC system, in which the local governments in Vietnamese villages and cooperative farm representatives work together to find buyers and to deal the best prices for farmers. Capitalist companies have to work with a collective of local government and cooperative representatives in order to purchase agricultural goods. And this lowers the chance that corporations will take advantage of poor and uneducated farmers. This is one of the reasons farming continues to be a viable way of life for so many millions of Vietnamese people. And this prevents us from becoming paupers and laborers who don't own our own land. I can imagine if the Vietnam government tried to pass reforms like the Modi government agricultural laws, then farmers, including my family, would be pissed. And I'm sure we would rise up just like Indian farmers, because laws like these would wreak havoc on the farming way of life as we know it. The Indian farmers and people were also outraged by these laws and began fighting immediately to overturn them. Indian social media erupted in support of farmers, and millions of Indian people shouted down these laws. Instead of overturning them to comply with the clear wishes of the people, the Modi government instead chose to fight the people and the farmers of India, as Dr. Rayalu writes.
The government and the followers of Mr. Narendra Modi indulged in a long, protracted, unfortunate confrontation with the farmers. Mr. Modi wanted to maintain his image of a tough, invincible politician. He avoided talking about the farm laws for 1 long year as if he were above the entire issue. The BJP has always tried to portray Mr. Modi as an extraordinary politician of the present era who cannot be questioned. The ruling class and the media loyal to BJP tried every trick under their sleeves to break the unity of the struggling farmers in the name of religion, language, and ethnicity, but failed. In spite of having a brute majority in the upper house of India's parliament, in spite of 11 TV channels day and night speaking against the untiring struggles of the simple farmers, in spite of scores of articles written against the farmers in all leading newspapers of all languages, the historic struggle of the farmers went on gaining strength with every passing day. Millions of dollars from the corporate giants for whom the 3 new farm laws were passed could not make any dent in the solid unity of the farmers, belonging to different languages, regions, and religions.
The corporate media in India even insulted struggling farmers by calling them traitors to India, which pushed the 50 farmer unions which compose the United Farmers Forum to stand up against the central government.
The top leadership of the United Farmers Forum initiated a program to educate the farmers and the people of India about their struggle and about the dirty designs of the rightist central government. Representatives were sent to every district of the country to communicate the truth to the local population. This had an electrifying effect, and the tide started turning against the opponents of the peasant struggle. Almost all of North India was engulfed by the peasant struggle. Every village and every nook and corner of the country started talking about the farm laws and the stubborn insistence of the government to go ahead with their implementation against the wishes of the peasantry. Then, one thing changed everything: the by-elections. A defeat of 4 assembly seats in the state of Uttarakhand was a big upset which gave a huge jolt to the captains of Modi's far-right party. Added to this was the intelligence report that the entire western Uttar Pradesh region was so influenced by the farmers' struggle that they would vote en masse against the ruling BJP. The leaders of BJP were unable to enter their own villages. Soon, the agitation became the largest peasant revolt in modern history. It was indeed a revolt. Generations to come will be telling their children how poor, unarmed farmers defeated one of the most powerful governments of modern India on the streets of New Delhi in a true Gandhian style, inspired by the writings of Marx. After 1 long year, the powerful government of Mr. Modi lost everything, and poor, powerless farmers won everything that was at stake. It seems Lenin wrote for this moment only when he said, "Without consciousness, the proletariat is very weak. When educated, the proletariat becomes a big force." A big salute to the peasant victory.
Congratulations to farmers' victory in India. The working people of India and Vietnam have always been good friends with each other. I hope comrades across India will stay strong and keep fighting the good fight against capitalism and imperialism. Thank you so much, Dr. Yuga Rayalu, for writing this great article, and thank you to our comrades at the International Magazine for bringing this important piece of information to comrades all over the world. I do hope you will consider subscribing to the International Magazine, because it is surely one of the greatest sources of information for the left, and one of the only news sources which offers a true communist perspective. I will definitely be making more collaboration videos like this with the International Magazine in the future, so stay tuned. And one last time, please subscribe to the International Magazine. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!